Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Today we're going to talk about the M1 real quick. I want to hopefully make this a 10-minute video. So, first of all, I kind of like the fact that it exists. It's a cool thing. SoC in a notebook. Why the hell not? The thing is though, the price. I don't like the price at all, and I don't like the fact that fanboys are, misrepresenting what it actually is, because a lot of people do that. And it makes a lot of professional people also pretty salty about it. Now, what does that mean? Well, the M1 is based on it's basically ARM architecture, aka RISC architecture, whatever the hell you want to talk about, however the hell you want to, refer to. Problem with that is it is very efficient at what it does. It is very efficient at, let's say, doing the thing it's designed to do. Like on a phone when you open Chrome or do anything on your phone. It's basically nice. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's optimized. It's beautiful. However, once you try to emulate more complex instructions that, have a higher power draw on CISC-based processors such as AMD and Intel, the whole thing will just borderline crash and burn, and there's nothing you can do about it because this is an architectural limitation. Now, what does this mean? What does this mean for you, the end user? Well, it means you shouldn't expect this for any professional usage ever, period. If you want to do some professional grade video editing, if you want to do some professional grade music production, if you want to do game development or just anything that is out of the norm, this machine is not for you. Now, I want to demonstrate this, or not demonstrate, but I want to it's kind of demonstrating, I guess, why a lot of things you're seeing is just false advertisement and bullshit. And why professionals and people who actually know shit are kind of annoyed by the fact that people keep talking about this M1 crap and how they misrepresent this. So let's keep going here and talk about this dude here. He is Mark Payne. He's apparently a music production dude. He uses something called Logic Pro X, and this is the first thing I want to talk about because this is the most, important part, I think, because this is the one that runs by far the crappiest. And that is FL Studio. Now, this video, Mac M1 with FL Studio, does it make sense? The answer is hell no. FL Studio uses a lot of these complex, power-hungry instructions that you find in CISC-based processors, such as AMD and Intel, right? It'll drain a lot of power, but it will also do, it'll give you a lot of performance. Now, when you try to translate that to RISC, yeah, you will find yourself in really horrendously bad performance. Even this stock non-plugin using basic track, the M1 is absolutely on its knees, and it doesn't matter how many updates Apple's gonna push out, they cannot make this work ever, period, because of the way FL Studio is designed to utilize on the processor. Now, what about Logic Pro X? Well, the M1 runs fantastically on this. Unless you do something, again, where you actually need more complex instructions. And this is actually where this guy is making a very good point. Because when I look at FL Studio versus Logic Pro X, I wanted to see, okay, is there any form of benchmark? And the answer is absolutely fuck no. Now, you will see at Logic Pro X, they will do, oh, look, my M1 can run X amount of tracks. And when I try to do the same on FL Studio, I don't find any. I don't I think I found one video where it's one quad-core versus an octa-core AMD, and they said, okay, yeah, this one can run 270 tracks, and this one can run 520 tracks, and I'm just like, okay, so why so little? So upon research and his video, obviously, he explains, well, it doesn't matter because in the end, it's just base performance of the software without any plugins, and every serious music producer was going to use those plugins. And the moment you use those plugins, the whole thing will shift drastically. The performance will go down by a lot. Now, this video here in particular, I find it really weird because he demonstrates how when he is quote-unquote routing to aux channels, I kind of know what it means. I'm just going to still quote him because I'm not a music production person. I don't use Logic Pro X, so I don't know a whole lot about it, but I can tell from this video that apparently the program doesn't utilize CPU as well as it should. This has been confirmed by a lot of people. And it is apparently on the M1 very inconsistent and unstable, which makes his conclusion even more weird to me, because he says, oh yeah, he can totally recommend the M1 for music production, although it's unstable. I'm just like, okay, wait, so does that mean it's unstable on Intel 2, or why is he, I'm not sure. I'm absolutely unsure as to, why he would, recommend something that's unstable. That seems dumb to me, but okay. He also shows how to optimize it. So if you run this program and you want more performance out of it, he gives you some audio settings things which can improve your performance quite drastically. So thumbs up for that. So if you have that issue, definitely check out his video. That being said, I still don't get it why you'd recommend the M1 for that, but it is basically just showcasing, well, you don't really have to do much to find the M1 limit. While in FL Studio, I tried to find the limit with, a lot of plugins on a 9700K, and it was kind of hard. I mean, I can't really, I've used so many plugins to the point where I'm just like, okay, wait. So if I try to use all that in an actual real life, I would actually have a difficulty to be able to use all that in a real, if I were to make a real track in the first place. So yeah, I could tell that FL Studio, based on this representation, is probably way more efficient. Well, it will also depend on plugin, obviously. I mean, you can definitely find some plugins for FL Studio that are not well optimized at all. But again, I mean, I see M1 users being like, okay, this is not going to run FL Studio, so I better not buy it or give it back or something, while Apple fanboys will just flame the fuck out of the guy, be like, just run Logic Pro X instead, you donkey. I mean, you kind of need to understand that if you pay more for a software like FL Studio and plugins and whatnot than the actual notebook, you would be inclined to buy another notebook instead. I mean, you can't really expect users to, just because you like the product, to just force them to keep it. I mean, come on, man. So that's one thing I want to say. Now, for game development, I'm just gonna say no, just don't. I mean, obvious. I mean, the reason should be obvious at this point. I mean, for some reason it's not. For some people it's not, but I mean, for most people it's pretty obvious. It has integrated graphics. Period. There's a problem. You don't have dedicated VRAM memory, which means making any kind of level design, especially in 3D, is just going to be terrible. It's going to be a terrible experience, given that integrated graphics don't have their own VRAM. They're actually going to take from the system RAM. So even less RAM, and your VRAM is also limited. You, as a game developer, want the fastest and the most amount of VRAM you can get. That's basically in a nutshell. This is why you see quadro cards having ridiculous amount of VRAM for, modeling and level design and whatnot, because you need that. You don't have when you play a game, you have like a very focused field of view. You can only have certain things streamed in with view distance and whatnot, so it doesn't drain as much VRAM. While when you actually have to develop a game, you look at the whole thing. You don't have these restrictions anymore. So if you don't have enough VRAM, you will quickly find limitations, and your game will have to be limited in the first place, and that's just shit. Especially, even if you're just a starter that wants to say, okay, look, I'm just starting making video games, you would preferably want the most amount of VRAM just so you can, get as far as possible, instead of just having any kind of integrated. This goes for the M1, any Ryzen APU or Intel integrated. You just cannot have integrated graphics, period, when you do game design. End of story. I mean, no amount of RAM will be able to, even if you have 128 gigs of RAM, and you somehow make it possible that you can take let's say 32 gigs of VRAM, it'll still not be great because of how much slower system RAM is compared to VRAM. I think not AMD, I think Nvidia right now is at 12 gigahertz? I mean, yeah, good luck finding some system RAM that even runs close to that speed. I mean, come on. So, yeah, now talk about video editing. Now, video editing, again, it's something that the M1 kind of excels at, but only to a certain degree, again. And this is something that I feel should be mentioned here. And the moment you do something more, a lot of people don't mind if the exporting time takes longer. This is why you also find a lot of video editing users don't use GPU acceleration for rendering, because The picture quality is typically more clean on the CPU rendering, so there's that one. And the second thing is that the moment you render video on M1, you will find yourself in a situation where, hey, you have a 4K video, you have you do some cuts, do some maybe some slight grading. It's fine. It's great, right? It's great. It works. It renders fast. Video quality is somewhat okay. Nice. Yeah. However, once you want to do something more professional, let's say you have 8K footage and you want to do some serious fucking editing, right? You want to do some there's just like one layer of, color correction or something. No, you want to do like actual hardcore editing. The M1 will just chug really hard. You will drop tons of frames, and you can't really scrub in your bar. And this is not just Premiere Pro, by the way. Premiere Pro just runs awful, and you can see this video for. You can just show here, as you can see here. Premiere Pro just runs bad. Now, a lot of people will say Premiere Pro is bad, and in a way, it's really bad at exporting video in general. You can see this also when you compare to DaVinci Resolve. But the problem is, you cannot deny the fact that Premiere Pro just is more versatile. It just has more features. And this is something that I personally like DaVinci a lot better. This is my main video editing software, even though I don't really use it that much. I still find it the best in many ways. Like, it exports really quick. It is very easy to use. I like the interface a lot and all these things. Well, Premiere Pro is it's a mess in many ways, but you cannot deny the fact that it's just more versatile. That being said, it runs terrible on the M1, and yeah, we already know the whole Adobe to Apple thing, right? So yeah, but again, with DaVinci Resolve, we'll find ourselves in a situation where the M1 doesn't really perform quite as well on certain tests, and the more complex it gets, the more problematic the M1 becomes, which you can see right here on Premiere Pro, obviously. But yeah, 6 hours plus, that's a lot of time. And if you compare it to the Mac Pro, which is just 22 minutes, that is kind of insane. Again, while export times might not matter that much, I feel like the problem with the M1 is just simply a lot of people just take it way out of proportion with the whole efficiency to performance things. While it's true that a RISC architecture is more efficient in certain things than a CISC-based processor, it cannot outperform them due to the lack of more power. It's not like this wonder chip, right? A lot of people think that this is like the next generation, this is like the next huge thing, but in reality, it's not. It just isn't. It's just a different architecture for different things. And when people try to do shit like gaming on them, and honestly, every time I see gaming benchmark at M1, I'm just asking myself, but why? Why would you do that? I don't understand, because who wants to play League of Legends on a silent MacBook with, in team fights under 60 FPS on medium settings? Come on, really? Are you serious? If you want to play League of Legends on a gaming notebook, which costs half the amount of the fucking M1, you can have, like, I don't know, in teamfight maybe 150 FPS. It's nuts even thinking about it. Now, the next thing is, and this is the last thing I'm going to talk about, actually two last things. Battery life is going to be the last thing, but this one is benchmarks, and I really dislike benchmarks. Like, Geekbench is the most dog shit benchmark everyone talks about that I don't like him at all. Like, alright, if you look at this, what do you notice? Well, aside from the first one, which, yeah, that's interesting in itself. I'm not sure what processor it is. Maybe it's the new renamed Intel to be something. I don't know. But if we look at this, what do we notice? Well, we notice platform. macOS. Yeah, these are all Hackintosh systems that outperform Windows by a large margin. And it's not because it runs. It's not because it runs better. It's just because, well, it's biased towards. Yeah, obviously it runs better because it is biased towards. It's more optimized towards macOS and iOS than Android and Windows. And this is why I hate Geekbench to the core, because it's just so misleading and dumb that I just don't like it. I think this is just stupid. This is actually dumb. If you look at this, why you do this, Geekbench? And this is the same with some stupid graphics benchmark where I'm like, okay, I think it's this ES ad stack or something, and then the other one, and then you see how the M1 outperforms the GTX what was it, 1050 Ti or something like that. I'm just thinking to myself, yeah, no, just no. Throw any games side by side with those two settings, and the GTX will annihilate the M1. It's not even close. But again, it's because it's an ARM optimized, ARM optimized benchmark. So obviously it run better. And this is why I don't like benchmarks at all when it comes to the M1. I think you cannot, or it's not even like a thing. I think it's just you cannot compare ARM benchmarks to or rather RISC benchmarks to CISC benchmarks. Just don't do it, because they're very different architectures. They're very different in what they do. If you do basic things like, let's say, open browser, I'm pretty sure the RISC architecture is going to outperform the CISC architecture. If you do stuff like, let's say, you I don't know, you go ahead and you calculate, I don't know, certain number, like a low amount of number or something, 1 + 1 or just something in that way. The more simple it gets, the actual more simple it gets, the more optimized it's going to be for the M1. The more complex it gets, the more the M1 gets absolutely shit-stomped by any AMD and or not any, but you know, I mean, there's some really slow fucking Intel processors out there. I might add, Intel Atom. Fucking look at you. No, but what I'm saying is, if you want to use an M1 for professional usage, then just don't. It's not ready for it. It probably will never be, based on architectural limitations. It is just where we are right now. It's never going to be there. But if you're a person that doesn't do professional stuff, let's say you just do casual video editing, you just want to, cut together your video a little bit, you want to, enjoy, and you want to have a silent notebook, you want to have decent screen, decent speakers, and for some reason you have a lot of money, or you want to, or you get one maybe cheap used M1 MacBook somewhere, then by all means go ahead. I mean, it's great for that purpose. It's great. If you want to do basic things with it, it's absolutely great. It's a great purchase. It's a great machine for what it is, I guess. But don't do it if you want to do anything professional with it, for fuck's sake. It doesn't matter if you want to do programming, if you want to do game development, music production, video editing. It's just too limited for that. It just can't really do all these complex CISC instructions in a very meaningful way. It just cannot be done. Now, last thing is the battery life. You see the advertised 18 hours. Yeah, nowhere near that. Honestly, it sucks quite bad. The problem with the M1 is, again, because it lacks those more complex CISC architectures. When you run Rosetta in particular, it'll drain battery really quickly, because it's not really, the moment it doesn't start to be, efficient, because it has to work hard the whole time to do basic things, you will see the battery draining really fast. There was one video about it where he talks about battery life, and I will link that in the description as well. He just, at times, he only got under 4 hours because he did something demanding on it, and that's just bad. That's not good. That's terrible. That's really far off from the 18 hours. Even if you don't really use it as for something demanding like video editing all the time, or gaming or whatever, you could still get really, like, quote unquote bad battery life. I mean, I wouldn't consider 6-7 hours bad, but given that it's, advertised as 18 hours, then yeah, it suddenly gets bad. And this is not because you do something demanding, as I said. It's something, run Slack on Rosetta, which apparently uses some sort of I don't know, I'm not sure what it uses, but it uses something to the point where the M1 just kind of chugs with Slack a lot, and it drains a lot of power from it. So there are these things. I mean, Slack, what is it? It's such a basic program, and yet it just causes so many issues for the M1. It's probably never going to get fixed unless they actually do an M1 version. I think they should be able to make a chat program fucking M1 version of it. It shouldn't be that complex, Jesus Christ. But that being said, I mean, again, there's again some issues the moment you want to do something outside the norm. If you want to use Apple apps, you want to do basic stuff, it's such a terrific machine. It just does everything you want. But the moment you do just anything way more, complex, you just absolutely get shit on. And you just feel your money got wasted a lot. So overall, I mean, if you really want the most performance, for your money, it's as usual, get a Ryzen based system, Hackintosh it, and boom, you're done. I mean, that's literally the most efficient thing you can do. I mean, hello, look at this fuck. And I don't mean that Windows is worse than let's say actual Mac OS on a OS to OS basis. But what I'm saying is that Mac OS has more optimized applications. Like, you cannot deny that Final Cut Pro is more optimized than, let's say, Premiere Pro or something. Also, that you can kind of get Final Pro for free by abusing the fact that the activation is probably the worst. I mean, that is the most pathetic way of securing, quote unquote, securing your software by, you know, giving you a 30-day trial that you can reset whenever the hell you want. It's just so dumb. But yeah, hope you learned something. I hope you don't fall for these insanely dumb reviewers who will just give you benchmarks and tell you all kinds of crap, and actually look more about what people say that actually use the thing for, or rather try to use it for professional usage, like this dude or this dude, you know, where he shows that, yeah, there's some problems. He doesn't talk about scrubbing, which is kind of sad, but a lot of people mentioned it in the comments, so there's that, I guess. So overall, if you are a student, you want to do anything that you know, is in any way, shape, or form that requires some sort of professional hardware, I would strongly recommend going for Windows as of now, because the last gen app, the Intel ones have some thermal issues and some you know, design issues where you have like a, you know, 52-volt rel next to 1.2 volt data lane on the CPU, which is just ridiculous to begin with, and you know, overheating, dead CPUs everywhere, you know, all these things. You don't really want that either. So far you can try to do Hackintosh if you're up to that. Otherwise, get a Mac from 2014. Those are the most stable ones. If you take care of them, they will never die on you. Just remember, if you buy one of those, you have to buy a little thermal pad, which you put on the graphics card, because the graphics card is not being cooled on those models at all. I don't know if they did it on purpose or not, but it is what it is. And obviously remember to put a thermal pad under your SSD on those models, because the SSD is also not getting cooled, even though it should have cooling. So just put a thermal pad under your SSD so it touches the motherboard or the logic board, special naming, and then it'll transfer a little bit of the heat from the SSD to the motherboard, and it'll just last forever. You won't have dead SSDs as well. So once you put those two things together in the 2014 models, it'll last you forever. You'll be a happy go-to person. I hope you learned something, and until the next.